Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to this online policy briefing organized by the European Policy Center with Bojan Maricic, the Minister of Justice of North Macedonia. Minister Maricic, welcome once again to the EPC. Before we begin, I just want to convey my sincere condolences for the loss of so many lives in the very tragic bus accident that occurred overnight. Just awful piece of news. And then, of course, I want to thank you for agreeing to speak to us today about recent political developments in North Macedonia, and also about what the future might hold in store for your country domestically, but also on the European stage. I will shortly pass you the floor so you can brief us accordingly, and then I'll give our audience the chance to ask you questions and make comments. To be sure, all participants are free to send us their written questions or comments at any time during the event by using the designated Q&A box that I think all of you can see at the bottom of your screens. Otherwise, please click on the raise hand button and wait for me to invite you to intervene during our Q&A later on. With that, let's get started. Minister, events that occurred in the aftermath of the local elections in your country in late October sent shockwaves far and wide, with many fearing that the resignation of your prime minister from office, but also from his position as leader of the ruling Social Democratic Alliance of Macedonia, could throw North Macedonia into deep domestic political crisis and possibly also off its European integration course, which it was following with much conviction and potential. Minister, can you help us make sense of these events and also give us your opinion of what we can expect from here onwards?
Dear Corina, thank you for this introduction. I would also like to express my deepest condolences for this tragedy that happened last night in Bulgaria, when a bus coming from North Macedonia had a accident and 46 lives were lost. A really a huge tragedy that has hit all of us deeply this morning. First of all, I would like to thank the EPC for organizing this briefing on a topic that is indeed current in North Macedonia, but I think also in the Western Balkans and in Brussels too. I believe that the upcoming weeks and months are crucial for the European future of our country, and that will also determine the country's direction in the following years. So this is how serious is the political situation in North Macedonia. As you already know, the ruling party, SDSM, suffered and defeated the local elections in North Macedonia, which took place a month ago. As a result of that, the party leader and the prime minister has announced that very soon he will resign at both positions. And that is putting us in a really difficult situation, given that he was the person who, and he is the person who leads the government and the party for a longer time on the right track and on the track of pro-European progressive government in North Macedonia. However, this announcement of the resignation did not imply that he immediately leaves both positions. There will be an interim period of time, which we will see how long it will take. But basically, his determination was motivated of several elements. One of them, very important one, a crucial one, being the impossibility to open the negotiations, to start the negotiations with the European Union. The European integrations are the foundation and the main narrative of the government, of the current pro-European government in Skopje. You know that the country signed the Prespa agreement with Greece. It was a very difficult agreement to push through in the Parliament of North Macedonia and amendment of the constitution with the sole purpose of integration in NATO and EU. NATO integration was successful, and we are very grateful and happy for that. And it had an impact at the mood of the population, of the citizens. And also we have done a huge number of criteria and reforms were done in order to meet the EU requirements, which was noted in the country report of the European Union over the years, over the years in the past several years. Practically everything that was asked from us was delivered. However, North Macedonia has not started the negotiations yet. Why? Practically because our eastern neighbor Bulgaria has demands in regard to our country that refer to issues that are related to identity, language, history, but also issues that cannot be resolved very quickly over time, but they demand a process in which some of those things can be met and some of those things should be some of those differences should be managed based on the European principles. For us as a government, it is really impossible to explain to the citizens at this stage that the European path is the only one for us, because we really want to keep that path, but we cannot continue with having a constant obstacles, constant vetoes, constant blocking, and doing the reforms on the one hand. The reforms that we do are important for ourselves at the first place. So the idea is to do it to bring Europe at home and to make it for our own good. But we need a framework for reforms, and that should be the start of the negotiations. What I can tell you about what's next. The opposition tried to turn the government down in the parliament. Luckily, it didn't succeed. And the basis for that initiative was only to turn the government down without any further plan afterwards. And I think this is one of the reasons why it didn't succeed. Now, the Prime Minister Zaev and the ruling party is in a phase of negotiations with one of the minor political parties from the opposition. It's called Alternativa, an opposition party of ethnic Albanian background, which has 4 seats in the parliament. And the intention is to strengthen the majority in the parliament after a minor Albanian party, BESA, has left, or 2 out of 3 MPs have left the majority, to strengthen the majority with these 4 members of parliament, and by that to have a support of 64 MPs out of 120. That is the process at the moment. I don't think that the majority in the parliament wants snap elections. The mood is catching that way that there is no genuine interest by the majority in the parliament to have snap elections, because we already had parliamentary elections last year. But what is the basis of this political crisis is that the general narrative of the majority, of the progressive majority in the parliament, and the basis for the negotiations of this now the government to form a stronger majority is based on the European perspective of the country. Of course, all the parties have interest to have a bigger participation in the government, to have more space for implementing policies, more places in the system. But the genuine core of the negotiations is based on what will happen next with Bulgaria and with the opening the negotiations of the European Union. So the interest of the political actors is still strong. Unfortunately, the confidence of the citizens is declining, and this can be translated also, and this was mirrored in the results of the local elections. The fact that we cannot start the negotiations, even though we have made strong commitments and very specific steps, it is frustrating for the citizens, and it is practically decreasing the confidence in the EU perspective, decreasing the confidence in the EU policy in the Western Balkans, and in the motivation of citizens to support the EU pro-European policies on a long run. So this is the let's say jeopardy for the country on a long run, to lose the minds and hearts of the majority of the citizens, and to lose the trust that the European Union and the European policy is the way to go, and the policy to support on a long run in the country. The detriment, the harm of this situation can be really very deep and can have long-term consequences. And this is why it is very important, in my opinion, to for the European Union to act. I will come to that a bit later at the end of my presentation. But I wanted to say that the situation in North Macedonia will certainly have implications in the broader region. We have open issues in Bosnia and Herzegovina. We have open dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina. There are also issues to be discussed within Montenegro, and particularly for the dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina and for Bosnia and Herzegovina, they all will use North Macedonia as an example to follow or as an example not to follow. This is why I said that there are implications of this situation broader than only for our country. That being said, I think even some officials from the region already say, why would we go into taking hard decisions, into resolving difficult issues if we don't have a strong commitment? And apparently the EU cannot make this strong commitment as it was in the case of North Macedonia. Therefore, I think that the upcoming weeks and the upcoming months should be used very well, because this period, actually, the upcoming weeks and months will determine the path of our country, of North Macedonia, for the future. Well, I would expect that a government will be formed. We will see how long Prime Minister Zaev will stay in that position. It will depend on his plans and his negotiations with the partners. But regardless of that, if we cannot deliver in the start of the negotiations very, very soon, that will certainly complicate the things altogether, with the economic situation, the COVID crisis that is still to be managed, the energy situation in whole Europe and in the region. And I think that all of these challenges will be much more difficult to be resolved, and if we are still outside the process of negotiations of the EU. Maybe they're not linked directly in a policy sense, but they are certainly linked directly in a political sense and in the stability of the parliament, of the government, and of the trust of the citizens for the EU. So I think that the time is not working for neither for North Macedonia nor for Bulgaria, because if we go on like this, the main jeopardy, the main danger is that we get into a scenario of a long-term or of long-lasting dispute that will take years to resolve, and that will certainly bring negative effects in the bilateral relations. Certainly will bring negative effects in terms of rise of nationalism on both sides of the border, and certainly will implicate in the other countries in the region. This is not to be underestimated. It's not like we are now only bluffing in order to get the attention of the European Union. I think this is already empirically proven through the elections and through the exit polls that we need to have an action on the side of the European Commission and European Union. The government in Skopje, the government in North Macedonia, is fully ready for a dialogue with Sofia on principled basis and based on European values. We are more than ready and more than open to discuss either with President Radev or with the new government, or with both, to find a way how to manage the differences over some issues. I don't think that the solution can be found in sketching all the solutions for all the issues now immediately. I think with some specific steps, both sides can show goodwill, and with a good plan of how to integrate the roadmap for implementation of the agreement for friendship and cooperation in the accession process, in the negotiation framework. We can do a lot, and we can find a way how to go on saving both countries from getting into a long-standing dispute. This is where I'll stop, but I'll just say that we have done a lot. Particularly, I can speak from my portfolio in the area of rule of law, judiciary, and protection of fundamental rights. And I think this portfolio can produce a lot of good results in the upcoming period if we start the negotiations and if there is an impetus from the European Union, because also expectations of the people, of the citizens of North Macedonia, are not to deal only with bilateral disputes over the integration process, because they symbolize the integration process only with bilateral issues, but to turn to these questions of rule of law, questions of judiciary, questions of integrating our country in all the aspects of common market and rules and values. That is much more important, and we would like to switch the reform process in that direction rather than keeping it only at the level of bilateral disputes with the neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister. It was a very frank intervention, and certainly I can hear your frustration, and understandably so. But I wonder if we can go back and unpack a little bit this event. How do you explain, for example, the success of the opposition, the electoral success that the opposition has recorded in these elections?
Well, if you closely have a look into the results, it's not that the opposition had a rise in the support. They have the same support as last year or the same support as years before, even a small decline. What actually happened that the ruling party got a big decline in the support. Of course, it is because some of the coalition partners have decided to go alone on these local elections. So they had their own candidates list. But if you collect all the votes from the opposition and the government side, still the government parties, the parties that are in the government, have more votes than the opposition in total. But in the two main opponents, the major government party and the major opposition party, there wasn't a big or any increase in the opposition support, but there was a just decline in the support for the ruling party. Of course, it's not just because of the EU, and there were local elections. People were assessing the performance of the mayors, of specific mayors, or also some central policies, but it still had a role what happened. The thing is that, and I think this is also a challenge for the country, that the opposition has not demonstrated any change in the position towards the Prespa agreement or towards Bulgaria. To the contrary, some opposition municipalities, few of them, have decided to avoid the use of the constitutional name Republic of North Macedonia for some documents. Fortunately, it is just few of them, but the trend is not good, and this shows that the opposition might problematize in the future if they become a ruling party, and this is really a challenge that we need to face. And this is also one reason more why the European Union, the Commission, the member states should act quicker. And this is why I say that the time is not working for us. But it's also not to justify, but there were quite difficult 2 years for entire world, given the COVID crisis, given the economic situation. So I think all of this together had contributed to the decline of the support to the ruling party, without having a rise of the support in the opposition.
But how would you respond to some criticism that was brought up that the reform agenda in the country had also slowed down, not least due to COVID, to the pandemic? Is that the case?
Well, everything has slowed down because of the pandemics, but also because of having elections each year. The reform agenda in certain areas is going quite well, maybe not as swift as the citizens expect, but I can tell you that also because of the situation in the parliament, in which there are constant blockades, filibustering, and vetoes by the opposition, some of the laws have been prolonged for quite some time. The social policy reform, the education reform, the rule of law reform, all of these areas were slowed down, and the effects of the reforms prolonged because some of the laws were either enacted very late or later than expected, or some of them are still in the parliament waiting for discussion and for inaction.
But as you said, reforms are good for North Macedonia in general, whether or not they are linked to what the EU demands. So I'm just wondering, to what extent is it possible to still push with the reform agenda and maintain the reform momentum, whether in the name of European integration or not, and so get actually to do the work that needs to be done for the sake of the country. So is it possible to divorce the reforms from this narrative that you've spoken about and this very pro-EU agenda that the government is having? Would that help? Would that be a lesson for to be drawn from the results of this election and what has happened?
Well, we have tried to divorce these issues, particularly in the past year, and we have established several reform plans that work at different levels. The Agenda 21 reform for fight against corruption, Europe at Home, also a reform plan that works. But I think that the trouble with this couple of years, particularly now after what happened after the local elections, is that we're gonna have to put the emphasis on the let's say crisis management regarding the economy, regarding the energy, regarding the COVID crisis, and regarding the European integration. So all of this in this period will be, first of all, in the first place, crisis management. But behind these four main topics, I think we're gonna need to work further on keeping up the reforms. In order to have a good dynamics of the reforms process, we need to have at least 2-3 things in place. First of all, we will need some kind of political stability and predictability. We are not facing snap elections at least year and a half in order to deliver something, because we cannot conduct the reform processes without having the political stability. The parliament must work more effective. I mean, the speaker is really giving a lot of effort to make it functional and to make it deliverable. Unfortunately, there was no mood by the opposition in some of the cases, in most of the cases, to make the parliament more functional than it is now. So this is part of one part of the story that we need in order to have the reforms the dynamic. The second is certainly the support by the European partners. So it's, I mean, me running the portfolio for justice, I can tell you that it's very difficult to move the things forward without the support of the European Union, although we have strength and all the stakeholders have strength to move the things forward. For example, in the parliament, there are now three, there is now a call for appointment of 3 members of the Constitutional Court. The opposition might decide to procrastinate, to prolong this process, but that will be to the detriment of the work of this institution. And I think the Constitutional Court is really one of the most important institutions in the pyramid of the judiciary and in this political system in general. So I think once we have the negotiations in place, the engine for reforms will go much faster and much better. we will move much faster and much better. And we don't think that it's impossible to make up all these missed years of being in the waiting room for 15, 16 years. We can make it up because we were not waiting, particularly not in the past 5 years. We were not sitting and waiting just to start the negotiations. We have done a lot, particularly in the area of rule of law, in the area of track record of fight against corruption, particularly high-level corruption. We have done a lot in the area of putting in place good system for fight against corruption through the State Anti-Corruption Commission, Deputy Prime Minister in charge for fighting corruption, strengthened position of the Public Prosecutor's Office for fight against corruption, and of course strengthened section of the Criminal Court that works on the cases of high corruption. And we have a good result, good track record of first court instance decisions that should be followed up by the higher courts. But the impetus for this was really the European perspective that to say. And I remember when we were enacting the law on Public Prosecutor's Office, which was enacted by 2/3 majority, one of the main arguments is that this was one of the elements or one of the conditions for us to start the negotiations. And this was motivation for cross-party agreement to support the 2/3 majority law. We also have now in the parliament, or we will have also in the near future in the parliament, very important pieces of legislation that ask for 2/3 majority vote in order to be enacted. And it's very difficult to reach those 2/3 majority vote if there is not this European perspective. So everything is linked to that, and we will, as long as this government is in place, we will push forward both the crisis management and the dynamics of the reforms. But it will be more successful, much more successful, and much more easier to move the engines fast if we have the negotiations with the EU. If not, it will be very difficult. And I think that on a let's say mid-term or long-term run, it might bring us back, and it might reshuffle the priorities in terms of I don't know, nationalism, keeping the country strong in terms of being having strong positions towards the neighbors, because this is what we saw back in times. You know, when 2008 we had the veto from Greece for joining NATO. It had very bad implications. Of course, it was partially fault of the government of that time, of Gruevski's government, but also I don't think that the EU and the others understood or have perceived the seriousity of the situation, the gravity of the situation, that the time will not work for the interest of the progress of the country, the progress of the Western Balkans. So this is why I feel once again that the time is of utmost importance, and that we shouldn't waste the time if we want to keep the momentum for reforms, if we want to keep the momentum for dialogue with Bulgaria, and if we want to keep the momentum for positive change that are driven by the EU integration.
Yes, and you mentioned that the accession negotiations would be the engine for that progress forward. But now we know that Bulgaria had elections again for the third time this year. Can we hope for a breakthrough now, given the results of this electoral contest in Bulgaria?
Well, unfortunately, this topic of North Macedonia and Bulgaria has dominated also over the campaign in some areas. But I think what we can hear from the winning candidates list for the winning party at the moment is promising. It will depend how the coalition government will be formed. I know that President Radev was also very involved in this process. We hope that Bulgaria will understand the gravity of the situation and the responsibility of their position as an EU member state for the whole region, because they are one of the countries from Southeastern Europe that are EU member states, and that should take care and help the integration process. What I can promise is that the government in Skopje will be open for a dialogue and for seeking for a solution that will bring benefits for both of the sides. But we have to base the dialogue on the European values. We have to base the dialogue on mutual respect. But we are more than ready with all the institutions and with all the actors, political institutional actors, to move the things forward, compromise and forward an agreement that will open the door for the negotiations, rather than to I don't know, sharpen the narrative or make the things more difficult. So Sofia will have a partner in Skopje for dialogue and negotiations, but we need to have a genuine, honest dialogue that will be based on European values and mutual respect.
Mm-hmm. I do want to open at this point the floor for questions and comments from our participants. So if you want to ask the minister anything or bring in your own point of view on the topic under discussion, then please do so either in our Q&A box or by raising your hand. In the meantime, if I can also ask you here, you mentioned during your intervention, and I don't know if I understood you correctly, that you're expecting at least some steps or stages to be laid out in the dialogue with Bulgaria. Would you expect these different steps to be set in place before Bulgaria changes its veto position, or after, following the change of mind in Sofia?
Well, I think that the crucial thing is to make a plan together with Bulgaria. It's not we don't make a difference whether before or after the veto. For us, it's important to have a plan for removing the veto and moving forward. We've been ready we have demonstrated in practice as a government that we are ready for specific steps throughout all this period. One of the main problems was that Bulgaria had political instability, given the situation with 3 times having parliamentary elections in 1 year, and not having a partner who can make this plan. Of course, we made some direct contacts. The Prime Minister Zaev had a contact with President Radev and many meetings, and I think there is a good basis for an agreement, or at least to plan the future steps. We are ready to make steps, but what is important is to see the purpose of the process. It's not just making steps or doing things without any movement from Bulgarian side. Of course, as I mentioned before, there are issues that are based on our identity, language, etc., which are very difficult to discuss and not debatable at all. But there are things that we can do. There are things that Bulgaria can do, and that I think that the most important things is to be on the same side with Bulgaria and to make a joint plan that will work in practice and that will bring us to a position to remove the veto and to go further on with the negotiations. What I mentioned is that we cannot expect that we can manage all the differences or resolve all the open issues in a short period of time before they remove the veto, because some of those issues have a longer character of functioning. They can be solved with a process and many stakeholders involved, be it the historical issues, be it the economic cooperation, be it the infrastructure cooperation and improvement. All of that takes time. We can start with some steps, but we can not wait for months or years to have the results in order to start the negotiations. What we need is strong commitment on both sides, and as I said, our government is ready for dialogue and making a commitment that will work in practice, that will clearly define the purpose of both sides, of government of North Macedonia and government of Bulgaria, and have a clear plan that will bring us again in a position of friendship, cooperation, as the title of the agreement is, and that will bring us in a position of working together on implementation of what we have agreed, and working together on the process of European integration of North Macedonia, because the process of negotiations, of the accession negotiations, is long enough to incorporate all the concerns of Bulgaria in it.
Sure. I mean, I did ask because in light of your intervention initially, I was wondering how a decision again in December to postpone again the adoption of the negotiating frameworks will go down with the public at home, and what it would mean for the relations between the opposition and government. But here I also wanted to ask, what are some of the issues that are non-debatable for you in this dialogue? And also, would you have expected the other member states to play a stronger role and maybe put a bit more pressure on Bulgaria to change its veto? How do you see the dynamics at the level of member states?
Well, I personally don't see this dispute, this issue, only as a bilateral one. I think it's really very important that the European Union can define what can be topic of the European accession. I don't think that the topic of European accession can be whether a country has a right to name a language as they want. I mean, Macedonian language is something that has existed, being one of the 3 official languages in former Yugoslavia, and being an official language in North Macedonia for the past 30 years. It has been codified after the Second World War, but it has lived, and it is existing now, and it's difficult to negotiate anything about it. Because the concept of the Western Balkans has been, particularly in the past 30 years, that each of the countries of the Western Balkans have their own right to name their languages: Serbian, Croatian, Montenegrin, Bosnian, etc. And we don't see a reason why should we negotiate over the title of the Macedonian language. There, of course, the episodes, because we might have a situation in which a member state can ask for, I don't know, part of a territory of a neighbor country as a condition for joining the European Union. Is that legitimate? Or is this under the principles of the European Union? So we need to have a clear line what can be matter of discussion and matter of demand as a precondition for joining the European Union. So I don't think that anything regarding has been guaranteed with the European conventions, that has been guaranteed with the international conventions like self-determination right, right of ethnicity, and right of identity and language can be a matter of debate. We can only discuss the mechanisms how to protect all of this, but I don't think that we can discuss on this. We are here also to hear the concerns of Bulgaria regarding the Bulgarian nationals in North Macedonia, and we as a government and as a country are ready to do everything that is according to the European practice to support any ethnic group in North Macedonia, as we have good tradition of protection. Of course, we can discuss the episodes in the history that are binding us together, episodes in the history that we have different views about. We can certainly, based on an expert opinion and based on a 21st century views, discuss some of these issues, have a joint or different reading of some of the episodes of the history. But I think this is not a reason to to block the start of the negotiations. This is something that we can do together. We have started, actually, the Prime Ministers Zaev and the former Prime Minister Borisov has started to honor either persons or events from the history together. And I think that that was a good start for finding a basis for some, let's say, having different or having new interpretations for some of the episodes in the history. But that all of this should be done in a mutual respect and with a process. And this is the only way to do it. This is why I said we have an open door for dialogue. We agree that we can improve the economic cooperation. We agree that we can improve the infrastructure. We agree that we can work on dealing with the hate speech or with any potential forms of discrimination on a long run. But let's start the dialogue, or let's go on with the dialogue, and let's start and all of this can be incorporated in the accession process.
Indeed, but as you're also saying at the start of this event, enlargement policy, EU's enlargement policy doesn't only struggle in North Macedonia, and we're seeing more and more issues everywhere in the region. So how do you think that we can, well, to use a cliche, breathe new life in this process? I mean, we've basically only just finished reforming the methodology based on the French proposal. I mean, do we need to look again at a new type of process? Should we look for alternatives? I mean, are we getting at a point where we need to admit that this is not working anymore? How do you see this kind of discourses that are popping up more recently?
Well, in order to seek for alternatives and to conclude that this is not working anymore, first of all, we need to give the chance to the new methodology. I think that this methodology was approved or drafted less than 2 years ago, and it has not been implemented with neither with North Macedonia nor with Albania. There are some let's say beginnings with the Serbia and Montenegro, but we really need to give a chance to this methodology, which we think is a fresh air in the process, but we need to have the process. So I think that the longer we persist in keeping the situation, which already lasts for 2 years, the methodology and the European integration policy or enlargement policy will be under question and its success. I think that Commissioner Vaheli presented a good plan, and it would be a good thing to follow this new methodology. And the only way to see if it works is to start the negotiations with North Macedonia and Albania. The clusters and the topics guarantee let's say, or make guarantees on both sides. On both sides of the EU member states, which think that the process should be stricter and should be based on merits of all the candidate countries, but it also gives security, certainty to the candidate countries that if they deliver, they will get their reward in moving closer to the membership. I think that also in context of discussing the future of Europe in the upcoming period is also a good chance to open the question of how to integrate the Western Balkans. What are the alternatives? What's the best alternative for integration? Because as I mentioned during my presentation, the European integration is as a process and as a tool for transformation of the societies of the Western Balkans is something that shouldn't be neglected. It has influence in the security issues in the Western Balkans. It has influence in the bilateral issues. It has influence on the internal dynamics regarding the political actors. It also refers to the work of the judiciary and reform in the judiciary. Certainly the economy and the economic movements in the region. So everything is related to the European perspective and to the EU negotiations. And this is why it's important, first of all, to try this instrument and then to see if it works or not before seeking any other alternatives.
Yes, that's true. But I'm also wondering, I mean, is it is there any other way than by is there any way to build a more positive message for why the member states should get on board with this European integration process once again, or is it really that we only have only by underlining the risks and the dangers, and only by moving from one crisis to the other we can get their attention? I mean, if we are to think in more positive terms rather than just focusing on the potential risks, what could we say to the member states in order to persuade them?
This is excellent question, and thank you for that, because I think it is really important. I think that the Western Balkans gave a lot of lessons to the European Union in the past 30 years. First of all, the lessons of having precious peace and stability, how important it is to invest in peace and stability. Second of all, the Western Balkan countries are in the middle of the European Union. Our countries are surrounded by EU member states, so it's very difficult to ignore that fact that the Western Balkans countries are territory within the EU or surrounded by the EU. So the economic cooperation, the economic potentials, the human resources potentials, they're all linked with the European Union and the EU member states. So the more stable and more integrated are the Western Balkan countries, it's better for the EU member states to have, let's say, a stable partner, but also stable territory in the middle of European Union. Also, the lessons for managing differences within a society, particularly inter-ethnic relations, particularly cultural differences, it is something that can be of use for the European Union and its modern challenges in the societies of some EU member states, or all EU member states. Because I think that in many cases it has been proven that managing the cultural and other differences, societal differences, is a challenge for some EU member states. And I think that, I don't know, for example, North Macedonia is a good example in this, having 20 years, this year, 20 years of the Ohrid Framework Agreement, that really has proven that these kind of agreements of integrating the differences within the political system, integrating the differences within the institutions, can help a lot and can add on the stability of the country and the society on a long run. And North Macedonia is one of the rare success stories regarding this managing of cultural and societal differences, both compared to the region and the Western Balkan countries, and even broader for European Union. So I think there is high potential of cooperation, both economic and societal. And I think some of the member states understand this very well, particularly the member states that are bordering to the Western Balkan region, but also others do understand why is it important to have stable Western Balkans. Why is it important to have Western Balkans that are closer to the European Union, or in perspective part of the European Union? Of course, it depends how the European Union will look like.
Thank you so much for this. I know that you have to leave right on time. So a final question from my side concerns the to-do list for the next period. I mean, I know that the agenda remains sizable, but what are you planning, especially with regards to your own portfolio? What is the focus for the next immediate period?
Thank you, Corina. First of all, I'd like to say that we are very proud that after 19 years, we have managed to implement the census of the population, something that has been a political issue for quite a long time. This year, the government, together with the State Statistical Office, under the supervision of the European Statistical Office, we have managed to implement the census of the population, and we expect the database of the census, the results, to be published by end of March next year. That is one achievement that we are particularly proud of. What we also plan to do is to go on with the reforms, with the check of the work and filtering of the judiciary, check of the work and improvement of the capacity of the public prosecutor's office. They have an increased budget for next year, huge budget for equipment and improving the technical capacities, huge budget for new employment. So we plan to strengthen and to see in practice better performance of the judiciary and better performance of the public prosecutor's office. We have already started, and now it's in early stage of this monitoring process of the high corruption cases. It's a project funded by the EU and OSCE, implemented by the OSCE. The process of digitalization of the courts and of the court system with the purpose of increasing efficiency, transparency, and quality of justice is also our priority. There are a set of laws that are very important in terms of improving the fight against corruption framework. So law on assets or origin of property, law asset recovery office, also set of laws that are important for the legal system, new criminal code, new law on criminal proceedings, law on state of emergency. These are only few of the systemic laws that we plan to enact in the upcoming period that will certainly remark the work of the judiciary and the effects of improving the quality of justice and access to justice. There are a lot of things to do in the upcoming period, but what we are really interested in is how to put all of this into a European framework, because the effects and the dynamics will be much better and much higher.
Yes. Thank you so much. Indeed, a lot of things to do. So I wish you success and good luck with this work ahead of you. And I also thank you very much for making time. I know that your agenda is very busy and times are very complicated. So I'm very grateful for your participation here today and for giving us your insight and your opinion about things at the moment. And I look forward to welcoming you again, hopefully with better and with good news, with more good news, and in a different climate.
I can promise you when we have good news, I would insist that we have a joint event once again to promote the good news. And thank you to you personally and to EPC for this opportunity today.
Thank you very much, Minister. We'll make sure to make it happen. Thank you. And thank you to all our participants. Looking forward to seeing you all again and to discuss Balkan-related issues very soon. Thank you.